Hello and welcome to another episode of the Strength Syndicate podcast with myself, Shane Story, and my co-host, Lawrence King. So today on the podcast, we have Gar Benn. So we are going to be discussing soft skills for coaching, how to be a better coach, how to get more clients, how to keep the ones that you have, and get better results with them, okay? So Gar, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem at all. There's going to be plenty of people listening to the podcast who maybe don't know who you are, or maybe everybody knows who you are. But nonetheless, I'll get you to introduce yourself, okay?
That was extremely kind and very wrong. I doubt many people know me, but thank you very much. Little boost to the ego. But yeah, my name is Gar. I'm the owner of CityGym Limerick, the European Powerlifting Conference, Untitled Support Systems Ireland, head of coaching with Sigma, and distributor for Elemental Formulations Europe, and soon to be Rascal Europe. So we got that coming in January. So we've a bit going on.
Yeah, it won't take me 4 weeks to get my Rascal t-shirts anymore.
Oh man, we actually did a test recently to see what would the key differences be between shipping from one of the fulfillment centers in Canada and America or versus us. So we sent stuff here to CityGym. We just happened to incur no charges, no snags, nothing. I was like, oh, this seems like an okay process. And then I met Kean Madden. I can't remember if it was the comp here or the comp up in Abs with you guys. And he was like, so yeah, I got like 120 euros worth of duty and charges.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, fuck, man. I was like, that's awful, especially because we have it like next month. I'm so sorry. But yeah, it was good feedback from poor Kean. And Kean, if you're listening, sorry about that, buddy.
Actually, okay. Keane is getting done rightly these days. I believe he left half his luggage in Sweden. So best of luck to him.
That was just hilarious to watch start to finish. Everything that was going on, the poor fella.
I did very well though. 9 for 9, second biggest total.
Of course. Yeah, geez, he killed it.
With that. So Gar, head of coaching with Sigma. So could you tell us a bit about what that kind of involves for you, and kind of like what is your kind of approach when it comes to coaching?
For sure. Yeah. So head of coaching means that I deal with the bulk of the clientele that come to us, but it also means that I try to create like processes and systems around how we intake clients and make sure that the user experience from the website right through to the consultation, right through to signing up is kind of streamlined and what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of intuitive, you know? So that when someone clicks on and maybe they've listened to the podcast or they've read a blog or listened to the many minutes of Danny and Alan talking about genius things that I don't even comprehend most of the time, that if they click the website from there, does it make sense to go from the website to the coaching? So a lot of the times just writing copy, writing through systems to say, like, when the client is here, you know, do we send emails back or how do we function with all these things? And then how do we basically welcome someone to the group? So that's like, user experience is always a nice thing. And it kind of, it really sets up the tone of how coaching is going to go, you know? So then from there, when it comes to actual coaching itself, is can we provide like I know it's thrown around a lot, but like a comprehensive approach that people feel all the bases are covered throughout the week without ever seeing them. Because like essentially Sigma is an only online service, which I know, Shane, you do with the triage guys and stuff like that. So it's like, how do we basically make it feel like we're alongside you for the entire week without ever seeing you? So that's kind of the things that we try to put together. And I hope for the majority of people that listen to this and have coached with us would say, yeah, that's a fair statement, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like obviously because you have CityGym as well, you would already be well adept with, like, you know, communicating with people, because
Sure.
I suppose that can be one issue that people run into when they want to jump straight online from their PT cert, or even, geez, like I hope they have PT cert at the very least before they jump online. So like, what do you think, like what did you notice the difference between how you handle clients in person and then when you started up doing online coaching? Like, how did you find that transition? Like, obviously you're still doing both,
So yeah, it's a good question. Initially, I actually found it quite tough, but we jumped online like really early, because myself and Danny, we're relics, like I'm 32, I'm old now. So like we jumped on this like when the scene felt like it was starting. I know people did it before us, but like it felt like we were kind of early in the door, and we were very bad at communicating. Like we didn't know how to do it. And as you said, like if you do a PT cert, it's not something that's covered in it, especially in any detail. Like most courses that do cover communications, it's like, be sound, don't be a prick. And it's like, it's not very helpful. I still don't know how to converse with someone. So it's taken like a long time to refine that process, of how can we kind of emulate on the floor settings from a gym online, But like over the years, it's refined, it's gotten better and better. And then also, I think the more time that you're kind of known as the kind of hippie guys we talked about before we kicked off, or the self-compassionate guy and the compassion guy, like you start to attract those clients well, which is very, very helpful, because there's a lot of people that would come and they'd say, this isn't for me. I don't want to fill out like a subjective questionnaire. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I just want to get jacked, bro. And that's fine, because like you gotta deal with the people you want to deal with, right?
Yeah. I think I suppose when you do build up that kind of reputation, I suppose, like you said, you're just going to be draw like to like.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk, I suppose, one thing I'm kind of intrigued about, you've mentioned it twice, is this kind of trying to relay an experience for the client, the trainee, where they almost feel like you're there with them during the week.
Yeah.
You're obviously online. Can you kind of talk us through maybe how, I suppose, first and foremost, how you arrived to that being the experience you wanted to deliver, but then I suppose the actual way you structure your training for that to,
of course. Yeah.
I hope that's clear.
No, that makes complete sense. So believe it or not, we started adapting how we do things online based on people that were starting with us. So people that had used other coaches like globally were coming to us and they were saying, I really like the fact that you do this, like a weekly check-in, for example. So they'd say, like, my last coach I was with did every month or every second month, and I felt like that wasn't appropriate. So every time someone kind of ticked the box for something, we'd kind of just take notes of this, like, okay, like people are enjoying this aspect of it, and we'll try kind of double down on this and double down. And like the same spiel I give to everyone when they start is that we have this like 3-tier system, and it just means that we're not very good at naming things, but we do 3 things, but basically all this is we have an online interactive spreadsheet which every coach uses now, right? It's just a given thing. And if you hook up notifications correctly to your email, you can basically see every time someone has logged. So we tell people this in the check-in. This is nothing new or nothing out of the ordinary, but it allows people to know that you have their back. So that's actually part of the intro spiel that we give. So we're saying every time that you click off and you click out of your Google Sheets, we'll get a notification, Shane has logged for today, Lawrence has logged for today. And we tell people this because I know it's something everyone does, but people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. At least you know when I'm on track or when I'm off track, or if you don't see it for a while, you can just drop them an email and say, hey, I know you're probably busy, but I'm just double checking, is everything okay? The second thing we do is we started this before the pandemic, but it actually became insanely handy throughout the pandemic, that we noticed, you guys will actually notice this from being in abs, is that the more you're on the floor and the more access you have to your coach, if you have like curiosities or worries or concerns or fears or whatever, when you can talk with a coach and they can put your mind at ease pretty quickly, like you start to progress a lot quicker, right? Yeah. So the second tier that we introduced was this idea of an optional daily email. Funny story why we have to name it an optional daily email. I have a client of mine, let's call him Kevin in Dublin, right? He's a lovely guy, not using his real name. And he emailed me one day after we introduced this option daily email, and he went, it's a really long email, like really, really long. And basically like, hey, Gareth, I took the dog out to Bray and we went for a walk and it was lovely. And I stopped and I got an ice cream cone and the ice cream fell off the cone. It's huge email. And he was like, well, I hope you're having a good day anyway. Talk to you soon. So I was like, what the fuck is going on here? You know? So you emailed back, hey Kevin, this is a lovely story about a man and a man's best friend, but you know, what has this exactly got to do with with your nutrition or your training? He's like, I thought this was a mandatory email, and I started to run out of things to talk about. So he's like, I just thought I'd tell you a story of my entire day. So now we actually, like, we have a laugh with this story, and we use this as the example of, like, it's an optional daily email, and we try to emulate the floor settings by, like, if there's worries or fears, concerns, whatever pops to mind, like, you have the option to email the coach at any given day. Again, I think this is something that now most coaching services have, but at the time they didn't. And also it's the thing of, like, telling someone exactly what you can do for them. You know, because everyone says I online coach. It's like, yeah, cool, but what does the coaching process actually look like, right? And then the third tier is like a subjective questionnaire that gets people to kind of go through their week in depth. And there's a whole host of questions there, but like some of the ones that like kind of evoke and kind of get people to think about things are like, you know, what 1 to 2 things went well last week and how can you build on them? So people have to really reflect on the week and go, okay, well, I suppose I introduced this and this, and they went really well, and I'd like to do more of that in the weeks coming. And then after that, some, like, the question would be like, what 1 to 2 things didn't go so well this week, and how can we get around it in the week coming? And people will, like, reflect back and go, yeah, well, I wasn't really happy with this, but provided with this context, I think that would have been impossible. But going forward, if this situation was to arise, I would do this and this. So basically what we're trying to do is get someone like this idea of, like, people know more about their own lives than we will ever do as coaches. So we're trying to get all the information from them and collaborate on a plan. So basically, when I send plans off on a Sunday night or Monday morning, I'm using all of their feedback that they've given me in these optional daily emails and in their check-in. So I'm like, okay, you said that this didn't go well this week, and here's how you're going to get around it in the weeks coming. I think this is a brilliant idea. And to add to this, I would even consider this and this. What are your thoughts on that? You know? So again, I'm not trying to lay, like, hardcore have to be done plans. I'm trying to say, like, I think that if we start moving in this direction, this would be quite impactful. But I agree with everything you've said. What do you think of this? And if we can keep doing that between 2 people, you end up making some, like, pretty successful clients, like, in some good amount of time, you know? And that's kind of why we talk about this comprehensive approach. It's not anything special, you know. Like, I think most coaches are probably doing all of this, but we just tell people that we do it, and, like, that's kind of oftentimes like a selling point, right? People are like, yeah, okay, they're doing this thing. Everyone does it, but talking about it will actually kind of reinforce, like, we are here, we do have your back, and this is how we're going to make plans together. And I kind of think that's quite cool, you know?
Yeah, and I think the kind of collaborative process in coaching is really important, particularly for people that you're saying there might have like barriers, kind of overcoming barriers to training, and kind of relaying that back to their self, or trying to improve their self-efficacy, then kind of making them involved in the decision-making process is vital, really.
100%.
So then kind of for you, are you in your coaching, like you obviously started out coaching, did you start out in your early 20s? Did you start out in powerlifting?
Started 2013 in personal training, believe it or not. Just no powerlifting at all.
Just PT.
Just PT, and that's when Arthur Lynch came on the scene, because I was looking for a coach for the gym, and I was like, you know, this guy fucking Arthur is strong. And like, it was like, it's funny to look back on now, because when he spoke about this recently, like, his numbers at the time, I believe, were about 215, 220. Obviously that improved massively, about 140-ish on the bench and about 240, 250 in the deadlift. But, like, again, it was just himself and Barry were peak performance in Ireland. And I was like, this guy's unreal. No one's touching this guy, you know? But it's funny how far powerlifting has come since, right?
Insane. Sure. Like, I was only looking at the, like, 93 totals the other day because of Keane's performance, and, like, it's like Barry, now Keane, and he knocked Arthur down to third.
So. Man, And what's funny is we saw that coming from a really long time back. We're like this Keane guy is like, he's better than good. Do you know what I mean? And it took time to show, but like he's what, 10 kilos over Arthur's best now, or 5 or 10, I think.
Yeah, 5 or 10. I think 760 and Arthur did 755.
755, yeah.
So Arthur's gonna have to make a comeback.
I'm telling you, man. Or what was he down in that meet as? What's Wolverine's name? Howlett, is it?
Which?
Because Arthur actually went under a pseudonym for the competition.
Oh, yeah, Wolverine, yeah.
We were like, who's this Howlett guy? And Arthur comes out with the hair gel, you know?
Yeah. Brilliant.
I suppose I kind of asked that from when you started coaching to going from in-person PT. I'm imagining you were doing early mornings, late nights, that kind of usual PT slog hours, to now. What was the transition like going from, you know, like nobody goes from A to B or A to Z?
Man, it was tough, man. I'll be honest with you, because I opened here. So I started personal training in 2013, and pardon me, it was like out of 4 Limerick gyms. So my whole day was like driving between and trying to get like at least 2 hours in the same gym. I was like, oh, I got to do 2 hours here because I can't drive like outside to Limerick County and then come back to do 1 hour here. And it was like a whole mess. But like I lived in absolute squalor for that year. I mean, like I made enough money to open CityGym, which I was like, if I can like really like penny pinch and, you know, like save everything, by the age of like 40, I might be able to open a gym. This is me at like 22 or 23 now, being like completely hyperbolic, you know, like, oh, I'll never get there. And then by 24, I realized like open a gym, like with relatively poor equipment, it's not that expensive at all. So the gym I was working in, which is CityGym, was actually TriFit before. And the girl came in one day. This is like where I had my most clients. I had like 20 something clients here. She said, we're closed, unfortunately. We can't afford to keep going. And I was so sick, and I was like, oh, fuck, where am I going to move these clients? You know, this poor girl and her business. Then she kind of like offhandedly said to me, if you want to take a stab at it, go ahead. So I met the landlord. It turns out that my clients were paying for most of the rent, and like, you know, I was 23, I didn't need money. So I was like, yeah, just not paying myself a wage, like dive head in with some new equipment. And that's kind of how CityGym started. And like the first 2 years, man, were so rough. Like we made nothing. Every penny that came in, it just went to equipment. It went to trying to get a new coach in. It went to putting on seminars. Like it was absolutely insane. And then the transition, like over the years, things got relatively easier and easier. It like moves you make, they compound and things become easier, which is great. You know, like if you're trying to get powerlifters in the door, but you don't have any calibrated equipment, it's tough. So then the first time, like our first purchase was pretty crazy. I remember the day we got a Texas power bar, right? That was the first purchase, and we couldn't get it from anywhere. So we ended up spending like a fortune, 900 quid or something on this thing. Yeah, but like we couldn't get it anywhere. And then with the duty and whatever coming into the country, but like we had a power bar. We were all delighted, you know, there's like 4 or 5 of us. And then eventually we worked up enough money to actually get like 2 sets of Eleiko plates, 2 bars, and then the combo rack. And we felt like the shit, you know what I mean? Like we were like, yeah, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. And once you make that move, powerlifters come to you. They're like, yeah, like obviously this is the place to be. And, you know, that becomes easier and easier the more that come in. And it's odd being in my role now, which is kind of like coaching / kind of business development. You know, like who else can we get in the door? Can we add like an Elemental or a Rascal? Can they contribute to the bigger overall picture of Irish powerlifting? It's weird to be here because as much as I've always tried to get here, I miss the hours on the floor coaching, they were a lot of fun, which you don't realize just how much fun it was at the time until you go past, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I noticed when I transitioned to fully online. Like, whilst obviously sometimes the length of the days can get to you, like it's very fun doing sessions, and it's definitely, I could see myself going back towards in time, like even if it wasn't for, I wouldn't do it at the level that I was doing at in terms of how many sessions, but I'd like 100% get back into in-person coaching because it's fun being with people, you know, and helping people in person.
It's absolutely like there's no better crack than seeing like the absolute delight in someone, right?
Mm.
You know, like they're really in it. You can tell that you've made their day, and like they're just buzzing. Like there's no better feeling.
And it teaches you a lot about then how to deal with people online. Like, you know,
Sure.
there's a lot of things that you pick up on in your first few sessions in regards to even just like how somebody moves, how they present themselves in their first few sessions to you in the gym. Like, you know, how to kind of go about people's mood when they're having a bad day. Like, and then that does transfer over to online, because online, like as you said, if you're just doing in like an email at the end of the week, you know, trying to convey your tone through that email like requires a lot of skill.
Yeah.
Like I do videos, so it's a bit easier for me to kind of convey my emotion. But I know a lot of coaches do email. Do you do you email, or how do you deliver it?
Yeah, I do email. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's I like the idea of video, but like if I do most of my stuff on Sunday from home,
yeah,
I've got 2 kids screaming. I have a dog jumping in another room. My wife's doing mad shit. So it's just too hectic. So the email will suffice for now, you know?
what do you think was like kind of the biggest things that you got from that transition from the in person to the online? Like what kind of communication that you got with the client in person transferred over to the online setting the most?
That's a tough one.
In terms of, we can start off with like onboarding.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for onboarding, like a lot of the times I kind of try to sit there and think like, because there's actual structures that you can look up. There's procedures to follow on how to write good copy, how to structure copy and stuff like that. But a lot of time I try to think, okay, so I've listened to a Sigma podcast. I've read the blogs, like I'm interested in this. So like kind of who am I? You know, like I'm someone who's already interested in nutrition. I'm interested in nutritional science, not just kind of the more the kind of the surface. I want to kind of dig deeper into it, you know? So if I'm that person approaching a page, what does that ideal page look like? And that's what I kind of always think, like, okay, when you read through this, does this actually sing true to you as someone who wants to, because like the majority of the people that come to us with Sigma are actually coaches, which is really, really interesting. And that took us a long time to kind of come around and say, okay, these are people that are already in the nutrition scene, or they're just very nutrition savvy. They listen to a lot of podcasts, they read a lot of blogs. They've possibly done something like a PN or MNU just for their own sake. So on the opposite side, this is who's coming through to us. What does that onboarding process look like for them? So like, what does that page look like? What do we say in the call? And we say these things again to them. Like you're probably someone who's already invested quite a lot of time in nutrition. You know, have you done any certificates, or have you kind of furthered your knowledge? And it always comes out. Like people say, I'm a coach, or I've done a cert or stuff like that. And like, this is stuff that you just pick up conversing with people nonstop. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's like, how do you put a proper conversation on a page, which is very hard to do because you're trying to have a conversation with someone that's that you're not conversing with. You know what I mean? And yeah, that kind of brings them through to us nice. We have a very nice consultation, which is kind of like, it follows a rough structure, but there's no actual script, we'll say. You know what I mean? And then once we get through, we're like, okay, where do you want to go with this? You know, like if we're 2 months down the line, 6 months, 12 months, what does the ideal outcome look like? And then we kind of work back through the call, kind of like sounding this out a little bit, you know?
Just for anybody that kind of wouldn't know kind of what you mean by onboarding, it's just been kind of mentioned twice. I'm just cognizant of there could be people listening that maybe wouldn't be in that.
Of course.
Yeah. That sphere. Could you kind of just talk through, Gar, about what you kind of mean by onboarding?
For sure. Yeah. So onboarding, like the start of the process, is when someone kind of has this haphazard jump to conclusion. I want coaching right now. So they go onto the website. They're like, yeah, what's happening next? So then the process brings them through to what you've written as a sales page or as a form page, whatever that is. So then they submit the form. what does that look like on our end? What does that look like on their end? Then it's how long does it take for them to get the communication back, and what's after that. Some people do, we do consultation calls. Others just send through an actual sales script. Other people, like, there's a million ways that you can do this, but that's the onboarding process. Then once you've agreed for coaching, what does the setup look like? Are they in the loop the whole way? Like, within the next 48 hours, you'll have your whole new profile. In that profile will be the following things, and this is the way I want you to read through it. So that's kind of the whole onboarding process, is keeping both parties in the loop throughout.
No, thanks for kind of going through that.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
I know there's going to be someone, because even I, you know, when you're listening to something and you're not kind of in that sphere, there's going to be question marks.
Of course.
But then for you, so someone signs up and they've decided they'd love to be coached by the great and powerful Gar Benn. What's your kind of, anybody that I've worked with anyway, there is those like teething problems in the initial couple of weeks. Generally there's a need for extra communication. You're trying to draw information, you're trying to get an idea in the person.
Sure.
You kind of talk through maybe that first like week, 3 weeks.
Yeah. So you're about right. It's the first 3 or 4 weeks, there's a lot of communication. So in the first week, again, as I said, everyone will know what's happening. They know when they get their profile. We've sets of instructions that actually come with it built in, which is very handy. Which is something, if any coach is listening, like, that cuts down on so much time, like just having instructions built into the whole thing. So yeah, then from there, we get people to track their week while filling out this form that kind of gives us a better overall look at not just the calories, macros, and stuff that they're doing, but the kind of behaviors and what their days look like, what their work or college look like, and, you know, what are the kind of roadblocks that will pop up in the week. So they fill this out for all of week 1, and we're pretty hands off. So we try to do 7 days of them just recording stuff. And then on day 7, they get their check-in, and then we form the first set of plans, which is what we try to do, is we try to keep it very close to what they've already recorded. Because, like, as everyone knows, when someone says, hey, record your behavior in any way, shape, or form, we're going to alter it a bit as it comes to more of into a conscious view, right? Like, we change things ever so slightly. So we try to keep it the same, with perhaps a little nudge in a direction. So if they're going to surplus or a deficit, we try to nudge it that way, but not actually go into it, and keep it as close to the plans as possible. And then we'll see kind of how does that week play out. And then we form plans for the following 2 weeks based at the end of week 2, we'll say. And that's when we start to actually go in a direction, and people start to see the kind of preliminary or first results.
Will you then, when you've gone through those, I don't know, 3-4 weeks of communication, is there an almost like, because obviously you've coached a ton of people, is there nearly like an intermediary phase there where you see that kind of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Those kind of problems dissipate, or not even problems dissipate, but that need for communication dissipate.
For sure.
What's that kind of point?
Yeah, so it seems to be somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks, depending on the kind of level of knowledge that the person already has. Because sometimes in week 2 and 3, when we start giving out these first plans, there's a lot of questions depending on someone's like already developed skill set or knowledge. And then the other side, it could actually just be things like, I don't know how to use the internet. And I'm not joking saying that, or even trying to be funny, but some people say to me, you know, geez, Carol, I have to email you. They're like, I don't know how to email, which is something I know we take for granted, but some people you kind of have to give them a little bump here and there for these small things. You know, they're like, I don't know what Google Drive is. I don't know what apps are. So you have to kind of give a couple of nudges. So yeah, between 3 and 6 weeks, you go from almost every second day communicating to like once a week, and then anytime something pops up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely my experience as well. Like the initial few weeks, like in my check-in form, I have a space for them to like leave as many questions as they have, and generally those first few weeks are lots of technique feedback, like, you know, just your generic questions, like, you know, can I eat white rice, or do I have to eat brown rice, that kind of thing. But then, like, generally after that period, it's really about trying to keep them consistent, because you're kind of bringing them up to speed. And then, like, I mean, if you're trying to lose body fat, or trying to gain muscle, or trying to gain strength, a lot of them are long, drawn out processes. And that's kind of where the coaching comes into play. It's kind of keeping you on track when you lose a bit of interest and you get a bit demotivated, and kind of, like, you know, giving you the bit of feedback and giving you the little nudges for motivation, like, you know, relaying back how much progress you've made to date, and then just saying, like, you know, right, you've made this progress to date, like, you know, how much more progress are you going to make in another 6 weeks?
Exactly.
So kind of going from the beginner phase to, like, maybe a little bit more onwards in the coaching process. One thing that Shane kind of mentioned we were going to talk about at the start was retention. For me anyway, at least, like when we're running studies here, we're running interventions, like, retention is like for me, like, a massive outcome measure that I want to try and nail. Can you kind of talk us through maybe a little bit on kind of key things you see in retaining clients? Maybe even people can go away from you for a point, but maybe they'll come back, and how you build those relationships.
For sure. The first thing I'll touch on is retention for studies, man. I don't know how you do that. I can retain clients, but retention for studies seems like a whole other beast that, man, I'm sorry you have to go through that.
It's like we ran a multi-arm parallel control trial here, where we were comparing different delivery methods of resistance training to older adults here in Carlow, and we'd about 100 older adults split across the 3 groups, and it was torture. No, it wasn't. It was actually class, like, but it was just the like, outside of the actual running of the study and the testing and everything else that you have to do, like, there is an element of like, coaching definitely involved in it, because even when there's a control group, you still have to try and retain them to test them and follow up. So it's there's a little bit of please and thanks, and you're trying to
a bit of plamassing,
but trying to get buy-in from a control group, where you're just saying to them, you carry on for the next 10 weeks, mind yourself, please don't change anything, even like you said earlier, like the immediate thing you'll see from anybody when they sign up for an exercise study, particularly if they're older adults. You tell them, oh yeah, you're signing up for an exercise study, is that fine? Yeah. You could be randomly assigned to any one of these 3 groups, is that okay? Yeah. Now you're into control, all of a sudden they're disheartened, but what you'll see, maybe you ring them at a 3-week follow-up to just do a check-in or something like that. Oh, well, I've gone for a couple of more walks now, and sure, I've started up yoga now again, and you're scratching.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, look, I don't worry about that. You're the star here tonight. Let us.
You're just over here having a little existential crisis. Yeah. The cover will be just me and Shane laughing, just be you here. Like but yeah, so outside of retention for studies, retention for clients, we do okay with this. So I can talk a bit about that. But yeah, like, I think retaining clients a lot of time is just how explicit can you be at all times with the client? You know, so, like, do you have some rough time frames in mind that you've discussed, you know, like, based on what you're looking for, and if kind of everything went perfectly, I'm kind of thinking about this amount of time, but if not, I'm kind of thinking maybe a little bit longer. So this is kind of the time frame window that we're looking at, and we'll kind of keep updating this as we go. And I think being very explicit about something like that it's very important from the get-go, you know, or so there's a little bit of that it kind of differs between nutrition coaching and powerlifting coaching, right? Because the powerlifting coaching is never going to stop, you know. But like for nutrition coaching specifically, being really upfront and saying, like, this is kind of the time frame that I'm assuming, and then from there, kind of updating that as frequent as possible, having conversations every week about like how exactly are you feeling? Is this still the goal? Do you feel that we're still moving in the direction of the goal? Are you happy with the progress? Like a lot of times, these are the things that kind of keep people taking over. Like, yes, I am happy. Yes, I do feel like we've taken a step forward. And if not, if they say, no, I don't feel like we've taken a step, then kind of coming back to this thing we talk about, like this collaborative process of like, well, where do you think we're breaking down? And in the week going forward, where do you think we can make some moves towards this goal? And again, rehashing that time and time again, like flogging the same like thing over and over until people say, yeah, I feel like we're moving in the right direction once again. And then I think a very key thing is being very crystal clear once you've done enough. You know, I actually feel that every week now we're just saying the exact same thing. I feel like we're in a really good place. Personally, I think we could be in a place to call it, what do you think? Like, have the goalposts moved? Are you aiming for something else? Or are you happy kind of maintaining where we are? And a lot of the times then people are like, no, I'm happy here. You can give them some form of exit plan with some ranges of like what things would, if you were to bounce back ever so slightly, what those ranges could look like. And that's where you kind of leave them off happy as could be. And, you know, you leave the door open. I'm always here if you need me again. And I think that really kind of, not only are they going to come back to you if they have needs, but they'll tell all their friends about you as well. You know, they did a great job. They were very professional. You know, you hear these things time and time again. They're very understanding. And I think there's one thing that we consistently talk about is like when you're sitting down to do your check-in, like taking the proper time to actually sit away from distractions in your own place and always try to think, all right, I'm going to try and make this email the best part of someone's week. It's not going to be because people live fulfilling lives, but if you keep that kind of thought process, like, you know, I'm going to try to write this in a manner that it really kind of illuminates someone's day. I actually think that people appreciate the emails, they appreciate you, and you kind of strengthen that, and you end up retaining them for a lot longer. You know, it moves past transactional to an actual relationship.
Yeah,
I think one other thing that comes into the retention as well, it almost starts at the start of the process in the consultation, and making sure that the person that you're taking on understands like kind of what you offer, and even like how you operate as a coach. Like, you know, you will have people who sign up with a coach and they think it is some kind of magic elixir and that you have the secret to what they need, but it's not always the case. And, you know, if you're not kind of clear on your offerings and they're not even clear on their goals, you know, then it's kind of when after the first few weeks, after that kind of initial 4-week period or whatever, that person's even motivation can just start to dip off, and then that person will just completely disappear, you know. So I think that's a really important thing when it comes to the retention process is, you know, not just making it work for both parties, because at the end of the day, like, you don't want to waste that person's time, and like, you don't want to waste your own time as well.
Of course. And that's actually over the pandemic, the kind of Sigma group was brought in for NASM to write a number of chapters for new courses that they're putting forward. And these chapters will kind of go across these different courses. And there's a key point you brought up there, which is not only being like very upfront about like exactly what it is you're doing and looking to achieve with them, but also setting very clear boundaries around everything that you do. You know, like if you get frustrated with your client because they're WhatsApping you at 1 a.m. to ask, you know, is it okay to put salt on my eggs? You know, like that frustration goes both ways. They're like, why isn't this fucker replying to me? You know, and you're like, I can't believe that they WhatsApp me at 1 a.m. about this, you know? So like setting clear boundaries of like, this is preferred communication. These are kind of office hours, or even like, you know, this is how long replies take. All of these things kind of build into it, because otherwise you end up with like button heads consistently, you know, like consistently.
So then kind of for you, one thing I'm just kind of hearing consistently is like communication skills are obviously highly relevant to the coaching field. What did you kind of, going from being PT where you could legit just, you can nearly tell by someone's mood as soon as they walk in, kind of how they're feeling, especially if you've that kind of, you're obviously some way empathetic that you can,
Yeah.
if you're getting into online coaching, I think you have to be. But how do you go from PT, where you can see someone face to face, versus to now you're still saying all of that subjective data is very important, and you need to know it. So how do you take that and apply it to online coaching?
Yeah, so it can be a real challenge, especially as you said a while ago, Shane, that it's easier to do through video, right? Like, because people can hear your tone, they can see your expressions and stuff like that. But like through email, for example, it does become a lot tougher. And it's more so as the weeks build with a client, trying to read between the lines of what they're saying. You know, if they're talking about struggles, like really sitting there thinking, okay, they're struggling with these plans. What does that actually mean? You know, what's the right question to ask here to find out what the source of the problem is? And that can be quite tough, and it requires a lot of troubleshooting. And I do think after years of it, you start to kind of come around like, I think it could be this a lot quicker. And it just requires a lot of practice to kind of read between those lines. And sometimes you're going to miss the point, which unfortunately will kind of spark people off. And, you know, I'm kind of hearing this, would I be right in saying that? And someone's like, no, no, you're not right. This is like, why would you even say that? And, you know, owning up, saying, I'm very sorry I missed the mark, but I'm trying to get to the bottom. Like, people will be very forgiving, you know? But yeah, it's always trying to read between the lines of, like, someone says this is tough, you know, okay, well, how do we make this easier? How does this fit into your week? How can we get around this consistent issue that seems to be popping up time and time again? And then people will tell you, which is the beautiful part. Like that's the good thing about communication, is if you get really good at it, people will start to tell you the issues when you ask the right questions. It's all like, how do I take enough time to think through this scenario, read through old emails, read through old files of data, and say like, okay, what's actually going on? What's the bigger picture? And you kind of come to the other side. And like, a lot of times it could even be something as simple as the goal they initially picked has changed. It's a very simple thing to happen, and people get frustrated because you're going down the same path. And when you kind of change course, all of a sudden everything seems magical and resolved, you know?
Yeah, I think that could be a struggle for people, though, for coaches initially as well, because they go from being in a position where, like, you know, you've acquired all this knowledge, the person comes in with the problem, you have the answer, and you just want to give it to them straight away, which is just not how most people will take that information and utilize it. Because, like, a lot of the time people, like, they, as you said, they know the answer to the problem, they're just not really doing it, you know, and you need to get them to come up with that themselves. Like, most people know, like, what a healthy diet would look like. Most people know it'd probably be good for them to exercise how many days a week, but they kind of need to kind of come to that realization themselves and kind of speak it themselves, rather than you just say, oh, I didn't go to the gym this week, go next week. You know, that's it rarely works that way.
For sure. And like, there's something I really like as well, is that, like, when you ask the right questions and then someone says, you know what, like, you're dead right, I'm going to overhaul everything, I'm going to do this next week, that's totally cool. Is that there was this very, very small part of the course I did recently in act therapy, and it was like a realness scale. And I was digging this big time. So it's basically, once someone has formulated their kind of own plans for next week, they've come to this conclusion themselves through good questioning, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this next week. They have this like realness scale, which I think is awesome. So like between 0 and 10, 10 being like, I will most definitely do this, 0 being, I'm not going to do it at all, I'm just saying it for the, just to get you off my back, you know? Where do you place on the scale of like, I'll actually go and do this for real? And what they say is, if it's 7 or above, then you move on to asking, okay, on what specific days and times do you think you'll carry out this action? And you actually write it down, you get them to take it away. I think that's a really impactful thing, you know? And then if it's below a 7, they say, okay, well, it doesn't seem that this is going to be something that's going to happen for real next week. So what do you think we could tone it back to that you could most definitely do a 7 or above? And then people, again, will give you the answer, which is amazing.
One thing I remember Martin McDonald mentioned it in one of his MNU lectures was if somebody gives a lower rating, so say if on that scale they give you a 6, one thing you can ask them is kind of a bit reverse psychology and say, well, why are you not a 5?
Yeah.
And then they'll start to say, oh, well, like, you know, because X, Y, and Z. And then they'll start to almost gradually move themselves up closer to the 10. So kind of using something like that can help as well.
I love that. It's very cool.
That's clever. Psychology.
Yeah, Martin's a clever guy, man.
So I suppose one thing I wanted to touch on was, like, self-reflection is obviously going to be quite important as a coach, because you know, getting feedback from your client to see, like, you know, what you're doing that's working well, what hasn't worked well, and obviously you can gain that from your past experiences and your failures, because that's one thing that people will have to come to terms with, is like, as a coach, you're going to have people you can't help for whatever reason. So how do you go about that kind of self-reflection process and kind of improving what you can offer and improving like how you can help people?
For sure, yeah. So I think people will kindly over the years show you where the holes in your coaching are. You know what I mean? Like it'll either be an abrupt ending, which you didn't see coming, and someone will give you some very nasty feedback. You know, I can't believe this, I can't believe that. And it's perfectly fine. These things are going to happen throughout your career. Sometimes you're just not going to gel with people at all. Sometimes you will mess up, and these things are perfectly fine. They're never kind of talked about in coaching, but you know, as humans make mistakes, and it's perfectly fine to own those and apologize to the person and help them out whatever way you can as they leave, you know. But then on the opposite side of, like, okay, so these kind of things keep being highlighted, whether that's like communication, actual knowledge within training or whatever it is. These things are kind of outside of my wheelhouse, and I've noticed that I've had to either refer that out, or I've had to hopefully not, but like bluff my way through. How do I kind of fill in these holes? Like, where can I go? Is there someone in that area that I already respect that I can contact and ask them, hey, where did you learn about all this stuff? And I think a lot of the time when you reach out to people, like, no matter kind of how high up they are in the industry, you always get a kind message back, you know, or they don't see it because you're in the wasteland of DMs. But most of the time, if you can get like an email address for someone and ask them, you know, this kind of sucks. I'm trying to get better at what I do. I'm trying to hone my craft and get a, you know, kind of get up a rung in the ladder. People say, well, I'd recommend you read this or do this course, or not even pursue it at all unless you can give it like 5 or 10 years, you know. Does that kind of answer the question, or did I go off? Did I just
No, it does, yeah, definitely. Like, I definitely think, like, it is very easy to kind of reach out to people you want to learn from. Sure, even just from starting this podcast, that's one thing I noticed was pretty handy. Like, fucking being able to email our accounts was
yeah,
crazy. So, like, yeah, definitely reaching out to people in the industry is very important. And I find it as well, like, from people who I would not have been able to help over the years. Like, some of them would have given me great feedback in terms of like where I could improve. And I think it's important as well to not see that as like something to take personally, because like, obviously, if you're working as your own business, it can be very easy to take criticism that may be related to how you approach things, like personally, like but it is feedback nonetheless. You know, it's better than no feedback at all, you know, because
for sure.
At the end of the day, like, that could be the difference between your coaching business failing or you being able to acquire like way more clients in the future.
Exactly. And like, to piggyback on the Eric Helms thing, like, I really think the time that I started to think about coaching a lot more seriously, like, how do I actually provide an experience rather than just going through the motions, was the first time all the guys came to Ireland in 2017. So we had like Eric Helms, Greg Knuckles, Mike Teixeira, Bryce Lewis. What did we have that year? Screamer Manuel. There's one or two others that are eluding me right now. But when these guys came over, and you hear them speaking about their coaching practices and like they're going into different things, you start realizing like, oh my God, like there is so much I don't know. Like there's so much, and that's such a good thing, because you're like, these are all the areas that I can now start to work on bit by bit and build a proper business, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely when it comes to, I suppose, just working with people, it's never going to be a straightforward process. Like anything that I know I've learned from training nutrition, like you maybe apply about 10% of it, and then the rest like just falls by the wayside, and then the rest of it is being able to deal with people, being able to communicate, like the topics of our conversation, being able to communicate with them, being empathetic, understanding when to push, when to stay back. Like it's a huge part of being able to coach somebody that is just not really talked about as much.
For sure. And especially if you ever want to start a group of trainers or start a gym or whatever, like in that top position, unfortunately, you don't get to be the coach anymore. You have to be kind of the liaison between everyone behind you and everyone in front of you. So like you're talking between customers and coaches consistently, and like anytime like a conflict comes up, you have to be able to talk in an understanding fashion for both sides, for the coach and the customer, because you have to be able to be in a neutral position, seeing both sides with, hopefully no favorites, and be like, okay, how do we actually resolve, rather than me just telling you to, get out of here.
And then I suppose on the opposite side of things, so like obviously we've discussed like in depth about like how we can communicate well, but like, there may be some of our clients maybe listen to this. And like how would you try to get clients who don't communicate as well to communicate better?
Yeah, so a number of years back, I actually wrote a whole article for this in Sigma, which was how to be an amazing client. And it still holds true. I still send it to people every now and then when they bring this up to other coaches now, not to prospective clients, not just going to big dog them out of nowhere. But yeah, no, still like some of the key points are like trying to get through to people that like there is two people in this coaching relationship. Lawrence, I love the way you're walking around all the time. Sorry, it's fucking. Everyone keeps coming into the room where you are. But
yeah, if you're watching the podcast, you'll get it.
Oh shit! Yeah, sorry, I forgot it's been audio only. Yeah, Lawrence has gone for his walk.
Oh no, it's on YouTube as well. So,
But yeah, so yeah, trying to get through to people that like there are two people in this working together, but just for the results of one. Like that's a huge thing to try and kind of really settle in, and think a lot about. It's like, okay, there's two of us in this, but only really for the outcome of one. So how do we communicate properly? How do we actually form a place where you can bring up anything that comes to mind? You know what I mean? And like, again, we talked about boundaries, and the reason I'm going to bring this up again is because like we don't want just anything that comes to mind to be sent over, Yeah. And the first person that actually made me think about this was, do you ever come across Andy Morgan?
Yeah.
Andy's a legend. So Andy actually has on his main webpage like rules. Now I wouldn't call them rules with my own clients, because I think it's a bit of a it has a negative connotation, but like some of his rules make sense, and I think you can portray him in a nice way of like, he doesn't allow any communications through phone, even emails. So if he sees like sent through Gmail app, he cancels the client straight away. Like he wants someone to actually sit down, write an email, reflect on it, and then send it, just so it's not like a spur of the moment thing. That's also why he doesn't allow social messaging, which I agree with, but I've seen other coaches use it effectively. So like, how can someone actually sit down and take the time to describe their needs in a week? Like, I think that's most of the time what it boils down to is there enough trust between the two of us that you can say, I really don't feel this is working? Because that's hugely important, because typically what ends up happening is someone has their doubts. These doubts build and build, and you think everything as a coach is going fine. So you keep doubling down on what you're doing, but their doubts are only building. And then eventually they either ghost or they just ask you to cancel out of the blue, what seems like out of the blue to you. But if you build this place where people can actually communicate and say to them, I want you to tell me when things are going shit. Like, I really, really want that. And people will be very upfront with you most of the time. And then you don't have this kind of like building of doubt in the back of the head. You're like, look, I don't think this is working. Can we try something else? Which is perfectly fine, you know?
You kind of like, what would be the, I don't know, I suppose we won't call them rules, but maybe like some of the key things that have enabled the client-coach relationship to flourish?
Exactly.
What are those?
And like some of those would just be like, can you fill out your spreadsheets on time? If there is a window for a check-in, can you make sure you send it within that window? Because, you know, not only is that helpful to you because you'll get your answers back in time, but it's also respectful of me and my timetable and other stuff that's going on outside of this. So I think they're like, from coaches that have popped up in my emails and DMs and stuff asking, they seem to be two of the most troublesome things, is actually getting people to fill out logs or put up videos or whatever, and submitting check-ins at the right time. And kind of on that, maybe I have a view that a lot of people won't agree with, is like kind of also know when to cut it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's very important, because people are like, you know, I got to preserve X amount of clients. Like, I always have to have this many clients no matter what. And they'll take like, we'll say like 20 clients, we'll use a round number, 20 clients, for example, and 19 of those clients will require a normal amount of effort, but one of those clients will take 20 effort, you know, take 20 times the effort to coach them. And people are really, really frightened about cutting clients, because obviously there is straight away a substantial loss in income, which is understandable. But overall, I think like for the amount of mental freedom you get, and for what it will do for both like your reputation and for the client, like you're not doing them a favor keeping them. So what it will do for both parties is only positive. And you can do this in a totally nice, amicable way of saying like, you know, I just don't feel like we're gelling. And I actually do have recommendations for other coaches that I think you would work well with. And most of the time people just say, thanks, I appreciate it. Now, they might not say that behind your back, but that's what they say to your face, you know?
We won't act as if there's a facetiousness to the interaction, but
exactly.
But do you find then, I won't say like as if there's a litmus test, almost like a right, this is the moment you pull the plug, but how do you kind of go about that? Is it just kind of like you said earlier, just kind of trying to be explicit with them, just saying like, look, I don't think this is a relationship that's going to get you to where you need to go? Or is it just kind of you, it's more kind of an insidious kind of a thing?
No, I'd agree with the former there, where you were saying kind of like, just over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that maybe like things are drifting apart, and I'm not sure. Again, you can bring it back to like, have the goals changed? Is that kind of what's going on? And I've noticed that you haven't been logging for a while, and you know, like the check-ins have gone down to like the most minimalistic writing possible. I'm just wondering what has changed. You know, if nothing has changed and the coaching is kind of stale, what do you say that we give it a break for the time being, you know? And I think like a lot of the time when you say this, like one or two things will happen. One is someone is totally shocked. Like they did not see this coming. They thought they're totally on it, you know? And they'll say, geez, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize things were slipping on my end. Consider this to kick up the arse. And they'll do a full turnaround, you know? Or the other side, someone will say, you're dead right. I actually haven't been feeling it. And I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't want to. Because that's always the way it is, right? And you're like, that's perfectly fine. Like there's coaching relationships, unfortunately, can't last forever. This is the reason that we have like average times. We roughly know how long someone's going to be with us in our coaching practice. And like you're around that mark anyway. So like if you feel like satisfied and you're happy where you are, let's call it a day there and things like as nicely as possible. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice, because like it's definitely happened to me. I'm sure has happened to many coaches. Like, you know, if you're like 6 months to a year down the line, and almost both of you are unsure as to what you are doing, and it's just a part of the process. Sometimes people's, as you said, their goals change or other priorities take over in life. Like, for a lot of people, like once they establish a good training routine, once they establish a good nutrition pattern, like it might not go any further than that. If they're not an athlete, that's pretty much as good as they wanted to get, and then it supplements the rest of their life. So trying to drag that out for much longer than you need to, it's not really worth both of your time, because at the end of the day, that relationship could end up going worse. Like, you kind of want to cut it when it's at its peak, as opposed to maybe some tension developing or something like that over time.
Yeah, you can really sour a coaching relationship by trying to hold someone there. Because like ideally the thing you do with like Gen Pop is you take them in and they have no knowledge of training and nutrition, and you establish all these like amazing things in their life of like how to train, and they understand the principles behind training, now the principles behind nutrition, and they feel confident in what they're doing. And the thing is, you want them to go. Like that should be the end result that you want, is for them to go and you've changed a life, which is awesome. But by trying to hold them, and it's often like selfish at times, I have X amount of clients or I have X revenue. Like you kind of, once you let go of the ego and realize that they're better off without you, or they've gone as far as they can with you, that's awesome.
Yeah, you've done your job effectively.
You've done it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I definitely, I'm on board with that. Just check my notes, see if there's anything else I wanted to touch on. Do you have any more questions, Lawrence?
I suppose maybe the only thing I'm kind of interested in, I know, like, I'm just conscious of your time as well, Gar. But you're a nutrition coach, obviously, and you're a powerlifting coach. How do you kind of find differences in your approach to the two, or are there differences in the approach to the two? I'm imagining maybe you said you end up coaching a lot of coaches, so your kind of need to maybe increase their understanding of concepts or of certain things mightn't be that necessary, but maybe it's different in the level of the client. But what's the difference in the clientele, and then what's kind of maybe the difference in the coaching process?
For sure, you actually hit the nail on the head, like true and true. There is that, like, typically with Sigma and either Gen Pop that are interested in nutrition, or coaches or whatever, we're trying to guide them through with this kind of collaborative, compassionate, this way. But with powerlifting, it's extremely different, like, because the people that come to you they're highly motivated most of the time. They kind of know exactly what they want. They have a very good understanding of it. Even a lot of the time with things like queuing, athletes will come to you. So this is the difference. They'll come to you and say, I looked up this thing, I queued something different, and now my bench has got up 75 kilos. This is awesome, So well, we could pray for that with bench, but you know what I mean. So sorry, say it again.
What's that cue?
Oh Jesus, man! If I knew, trust me. So yeah, like there, a lot of the powerlifting athletes are just very, very driven people, and a lot of the time, the only kind of compassion that carries back across is trying to get someone to understand just how impactful real life is. It's like, I understand powerlifting life in the gym matters more than anything to you right now. And that's I'm behind that 100%. But you can't tell me that, like, fighting with the missus or the fella, your boss killing you at work, getting sleepless nights, that this isn't affecting you in some way, shape, or form. So if we pay some attention here, I guarantee you the gym life gets better. Like, that's the only time that really carries back, is when we're trying to get people to view the picture in the round, like the whole life,
Yeah.
But outside of that, like, I find powerlifting, like, just kind of thrilling just because of that. Like, people are very driven, You
end up working, I suppose, with like you said, in the spectrum of people to work with, where you're going from Gen Pop, never lifted a weight, couldn't tell you what a macro is, to people that are nearly so unidimensional in their personality, their lives, that like it's so far gone from normality, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because you do end up like working and existing in that kind of sphere where you become deconditioned almost to reality. Like like me and Shane at least like exist in a sphere, in a social circle where everyone, probably most people at least track their food. Most people strength train 4 days a week. Like if you're in abs, you get up on a Sunday morning at like 6 or 7 to be in the gym for 9.
Yeah.
It's not a normal way of existing. So like when you come back and you end up working with someone that is just kind of like as an abstraction interested in looking better or getting stronger, or performing better, it's kind of hard to pull yourself out of that.
It's hard to recalibrate the scales and pull back, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if like I know from my own perspective, if I am in like kind of athlete mode, like say like prep for a competition like the one I'm now, my standards for what I deem acceptable with myself, like if I was to hold them to what my clients should be achieving for, like I probably wouldn't have any clients.
It's so true though, isn't it?
So kind
It's
of
so true.
Is very important.
The subjective aspect, though, like where you I don't know what you use as the point of kind of being what kind of bought into something or to be motivated, like where we exist in a world that's so abnormal to most things, like no GA players are really, well, not none, but kind of live this existence where you're watching what you're eating, you're nearly falling asleep thinking about your top set in the morning. It is a weird world. Is there anything kind of, Gar, that you feel we left out, or anything, any kind of little bits of advice or wisdom you could pass on to coaches here?
No, so I think in terms of wisdom, you're probably looking at the wrong person. But like overall, like just continually looking at communication, it does help. You know what I mean? Like that's the one thing that, like, if you're running a business, you got to communicate with the public. If you're a coach, you got to communicate with clients. If you have friendships or relationships, you got to communicate with the others. So you got stuff all the time. And I think that's the one that you can kind of keep driving home and never stop learning about,
Yeah, reflect, get feedback from the people in front of you, and make your job a lot easier.
That's it. Yeah.
Garrett, before we wrap up the podcast, would you like to tell everybody at home where they can find you? Not your address, but like so.
Yeah, so just Gar Benn on Instagram. There's 2 of us. One is I'm obviously the Irish one. The other guy is in Asia, and he has a washing machine. That's his only photo. So not that guy. I am the other Gar Benn. Unfortunately, he has the original name, so I am Gar_Ben. Not the original. What can I say?
Imposter.
Imposter.
If people were interested in getting coached by you, they would hit up Sigma Nutrition, or? For
sure, yeah. If you just go onto my Instagram, the link tree there has, if it's CityGym for powerlifting, Sigma Nutrition for nutrition, we got everything on there.
Nice one. Link trees are handy.
A whole lot,
including classical apparel in the next couple of weeks.
That's it.
Deadly. Gar, that was a great chat. Thanks so much.
Yeah, lads, that was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gar. So yeah, if you enjoyed that podcast, do leave a rating, share on your Instagram or whatever social media app you use, MySpace, whatever. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next one. So talk to you later.